a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What is happening to me?
The answer is out there, Neo. It's the question that drives us.
What is the Matrix?
The Matrix is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
Human beings are a disease. You are a cancer of this planet. And we are the cure.
Welcome back to the Inner Circle. It's been a minute, but we're back, and today we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite movies, as well as yours.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard about this yet, but there's a little trailer that came out a few weeks ago called Matrix Resurrections. So it's I think it's about time that we talked about the Matrix. Well, I think we should start by addressing, what everybody remembers the Matrix for, generally.
That 360 slow-mo shot and then Neo bending backwards.
Essentially popularizing bullet time, as it's called now.
So as an action movie, how do you feel about the Matrix? Like where would it fall on your personal ranking of favorite action movies? And how do you feel about its influences and how it's influenced other movies?
Well, okay, so The Matrix came out at a very important time, the turn of the century, 1999. And at that point, there weren't very many quality sci-fi franchises that were blowing people's minds. Like before The Matrix, you had Blade Runner, which didn't even really do that well when it first came out.
That's not true though, because at the turn of the millennium, we had Star Wars, we had The Phantom Menace.
Oh no! You had Star Wars, and then The Phantom Menace came out the same year as The Matrix. So it was a big year for Star Wars. But that's really, that's all I can think of is 2001, Logan's Run, just a handful of sci-fi classics, nothing really groundbreaking since the 70s or 80s, right?
There was nothing building to it. No, there was nothing culturally building to it. It just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and also to my knowledge, the advertising just did not show you any plot details at all. It was just words and images, and they all looked cool. Everybody that went to the theater had no idea what they were about to see, but they were all excited to see it. And it's not like that anymore. No movie advertises that way.
All you knew was black leather and people doing karate kicks.
Right. So it was definitely sold on it being a action movie.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody expected it to be this, really heady sci-fi film.
Yeah, and that's something interesting about the first Matrix film. I think the heady sci-fi-ness, it's still there. It's way more present in the sequels, but it's still there in the first one. But I feel like they do enough of a normal film plot progression with crazy stunt work action for people to like kind of not notice it the same way they do later on.
Yeah, no, I agree. The wire work is pretty, like, even the sequels could not match the wire work that they did in this first film. And the whole movie kind of feels like a balancing act between action and that sort of more philosophical sci-fi headiness that the other movies are known for. But it's a balancing act to where, like, it's not one over the other. It's like perfectly balanced. Mm-hmm. It's very palatable, I would say.
Yeah, I just most of my interest when it comes to The Matrix as like the first film is it's all in the world building and the characters, which
absolutely, yeah.
Which to a lot of people and a lot of other people I know is like the weakest part for them. Like they could care less about the spoken history of Zion and the scenes on Nebuchadnezzar. Like they all they care about is the moment they plug in and everybody has their guns.
I know Kung Fu.
I know Kung Fu.
That by the way, that whole sequence where he's learning all of the martial arts, including drunken boxing, I think that's my favorite like little snippet moment in the whole film. I think about that a lot. I think about like what if we could just upload martial arts into our brain and then just master it in 10 seconds.
There's interesting things happening with the characters in The Matrix.
Oh, absolutely.
That doesn't get highlighted enough. Like fucking like Cypher, maybe
one of the most layered characters in the whole series.
One of my favorite like movie villains when it, like at least on like the level I would rank The Matrix, you know?
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite movie villains because his motivations are simple, but it's executed so precisely and cleanly and set up so quickly to where you just I buy into him. I buy into him and how much he hates being outside the machine world.
After 9 years, you know what I realized? Ignorance is bliss.
Coming off of that, would you say that Cypher is like the real villain versus Smith?
I think in the first movie, definitely Cypher would be he is the main antagonist, and I mean later on, you know, it comes back around. Mm-hmm. But Cypher's definitely the main antagonist of the first film. Smith doesn't really become the main antagonist until the final scene with Morpheus, I think, where like the interrogation, where he reveals his own motivations.
I must get out of here. I must get free. And in this mind is the key, my key.
But I don't feel like that's enough to make him the main villain. I think it's definitely Cypher, because he's set up very early as like hating the world they live in, and he's always
from the very beginning, really.
He's always separate from the team. He's always fighting them, kind of like he's disagreeing with them on everything. Mm-hmm. So I feel like he is the main villain, and his deal with the agents just kind of ties the two villain arcs together more than anything. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I never looked at it that way before. He does really tie the whole thing together. He's kind of more present for a majority of the film than Smith even is.
Yeah, like he's there the whole time.
Yeah.
He's the one who kills the team. I mean, he's the one who does everything a main villain of a film should do. Smith is only really active at the end.
And also, like, I think the reason people sort of cling to Smith as the villain of The Matrix is not just because he's played by Hugo Weaving, because Hugo Weaving, like, iconic in that role. He owns it. But they give him time to build up. Like, Cypher is sort of the center bad guy of the first and second act. Mm-hmm. And by the time Cypher, like, messes up and gets killed off, is now Smith's time to shine. And he's had time to breathe throughout the whole movie. So people sort of, like, cling to him since he's probably the most developed by that time. It was really like a, kind of almost a cultural revolution when that movie came out.
Yeah.
Because ever since The Matrix, nobody has really, at least movie fans, I guess, nobody looks at reality the same way. You know, the whole joke of, are we living in a simulation? That wasn't a Rick and Morty thing, kids. That was a Matrix thing. Just so you know.
God, you're the oldest 20-year-old boomer I've ever met.
Well, okay, yes. The next logical step is to talk about the hero of the Matrix, Neo, and how him being the chosen one is not cliche because he's actually built up in a way that's satisfying.
So do you think Neo is an interesting protagonist?
Absolutely, yeah, I do.
Okay, elaborate.
All right, so here's why. Smith kind of explains it all in that first scene where he's interrogating him.
In one life, you're Thomas A. Anderson, program writer for a respectable software company. The other life is lived in computers, where you go by the hacker alias Neo and are guilty of virtually every computer crime we have a law for. One of these lives has a future, and one of them does not.
So from the very beginning, he's like an average guy who is living a life behind the scenes that nobody else knows about. And then when he's found out, his whole life starts to crumble beyond anything he could have ever imagined. You sort of take him from living a normal dead-end life to suddenly realizing that all of humanity has been enslaved by a race of machines for God knows how long. Those are like mind-shattering things to think about, let alone being told that you are the prophesized Messiah.
He adjusts to waking up to the real world pretty well, and
well, he has some scenes where he has his freak out moments, right?
but he adjusts to it pretty well.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe?
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real?
Like, I guess if I was gonna like just break down the plot of the Matrix, of the first movie, because it does follow a more traditional film plot structure, and scene by scene, you know, like beat here,
Paced very well.
Exposition scene here, action scene, exposition, you know, character, whatever. It's
moments of breathing time and then followed by moments of visually stimulating action. And like the whole concept of the Matrix is just so beyond anything that anyone else was doing at the time. The Wachowskis kind of came out of nowhere with it. Because they'd only done like one movie professionally before The Matrix, am I right? Because I haven't even seen it. I think we need to go back and give that a watch if we ever figure out what the title is.
In The Matrix, in the original, do you think, like, how do you feel about it? Because it is, what do you think the story is? Because for me, it's definitely, on the self-contained level, it's definitely like a story of rebirth, of like a literal physical and spiritual rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how I see it. I want to know what your interpretation of that is.
My interpretation of The Matrix is it's tackling a lot all at once. But it's tackling a lot all at once because it's trying to it's trying to say something about human existence, and there's so many facets of human existence that you can explore. Probably the deepest of which are, like we said, the religious aspect, the reality, your perception of reality, your physical senses, being a part of a system under control, or if you're in control of your own life. All those themes are present. But at the end of the day, what I interpret The Matrix as is it's, on the surface level, it's a chosen one story, right?
Mm.
But it's a chosen one story that's done in a way that nobody else has done before and nobody else will do after. This is why I put the Matrix trilogy up there with like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Star Wars trilogy, the great cinema trilogies of the world. Because at every turn in Neo's journey, you're just like, okay, he's the prophesized Messiah. What cool thing is he going to do now? You have those moments where he does cool things, but they're interspersed between moments where he's actually challenged as a human being. You never forget the fact that Neo is a human at his core. And that's what I appreciate the most about The Matrix, is it's just a human story done so uniquely.
So are you saying that that's why you think it's so special, because of the way it humanizes the Chosen One story?
To me, yes, that's
Okay.
what I'm saying. Yeah. We haven't talked about Morpheus and Trinity, the other two pinnacle characters.
Okay, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with Trinity.
Okay. What is it about, how would you break down Trinity?
How do I break down Trinity? I'm gonna be honest, there's not a lot to her in the first film. We're hinted at things, but she doesn't really become a more well-rounded character, at least in my opinion, until the sequels.
Yeah, and I feel like in the first film, she is not completely relegated to the role of love interest, but they kind of use her. She's used mostly as Neo's motivation.
Yeah, so no, she is
mostly the motivation.
She is the vehicle for Neo's initial development, and for a lot of his development going forward. But that aside, like, Trinity in the first film, while she is set up as her own person, her own character, you find out at the end that obviously, she falls for Neo, and it was fated, depending on your perspective of it, to be that way. And the thing that bothers me the most, it wouldn't bother me that she's, the love interest, sort of in a generic way. It wouldn't bother me so much if she didn't give him the kiss of life. That is the one thing in the first Matrix that strikes me as aggressively cliche.
It's a little forced.
Yeah.
It's a little forced as a plot element, but it's really interesting that Trinity is she's the first person we see in the movie. She is introduced, she's the first protagonist that we meet. And just the motivations behind that, behind having her be the first face that the audience sees. What is the meaning behind it?
Well, this is something that I want to get into more with the sequel talk, but I'll touch on it because I think this plays into the Trinity thing. The Wachowskis famously, they were born biologically male and they made a transition to female.
Which has led all these years later for a lot of people to subscribe to the theory that the Matrix is a giant trans allegory, which is probably true because the Matrix covers a lot of things, but
I think it's true to an extent.
I don't buy into the theory a lot of people do, where they've just accepted because of what's happened to what the creators, how their lives have played out in real life. People buy into the theory that's what the Matrix was. I think it's a part of it.
It's definitely, the Matrix is it has such a broad scope. It's about more than just that. It's about the human condition in general, but there's also elements, I think, of their personal journey that they definitely sprinkled in there.
It plays into the whole rebirth thing, the whole rebirth element of it.
And in breaking free from the system.
Getting out of the factory mold and all
the
that.
Constructed reality. So I understand that, and I feel like having Trinity be the face of the film, a little more so than Neo even, is kind of in a way, a commentary on that gender doesn't really matter. At least to the Wachowskis. Their perspective is gender's fluid. If you're human, you're human. Doesn't matter if you're male or female. Because I would put Trinity up there with the likes of Ripley and Sarah Connor and all the great female protagonists. Yeah, I never really, until you asked me, I didn't really think about it, but she is kind of the face of the first Matrix.
That's what I'm saying. Like this whole time, anytime I'm thinking about this first movie, I can only get my thoughts out as questions about it, because that's what the first movie does best. It gets
you asking questions.
It asks a lot of questions, and just leaves them hanging, which is, you know, why it's fucking so great that it's followed up the way it is, where you start getting answers and you can start theorizing more.
Because at the end of the day, if you want to break The Matrix down into simple terms, it's a fun sci-fi action movie that manages to challenge the audience in a really unique way.
Yeah.
It doesn't treat the audience as stupid either.
Yeah, it plays everything very, very straight, and it doesn't it never has a scene where it like talks down to the audience, like, okay, idiots, here's what we're doing, here's our premise. Like it plays everything very straight. Every character's in their roles, which, like, you know, Neo's chosen one, main hero archetype. Trinity's in this film regarded like more so, you know, kind of a love interest, mentor-ish, but the true mentor character who doesn't get that much development in this film. It's only in the second film and third where it happens, but
Morpheus, right?
Morpheus is like in this film as like just the true mentor character.
He is
like
the sage of the movie.
Yeah, he's the sage. He's there to like guide Neo along his journey.
Exactly.
But because of that, I don't feel like I can come up with enough to break them down in the context of this one film.
Well, it's amazing to me that, like, you can break down Morpheus as the sage character, the wise old man archetype. Mm-hmm. He's Neo's Obi-Wan. But the character of Morpheus has permeated pop culture in a way that's like everybody can recognize Morpheus at this point.
And everyone knows what those sunglasses. You don't even need to see Lawrence Fishburne's face. It's just, if someone sees the sunglasses and literally his coat, they're like, it's the pill guy. It's the guy with the pills. I call the original Matrix a solid action film with you know, the groundbreaking visuals and stunt work, and, you know, that everybody knows it has. It's a solid action film with good characters and good world building. Like it's a good 8 out of 10. Like, it's a good 8 out of 10. If somebody wants to see an action movie that I know is going to blow their mind if they somehow don't know about it, it's the one I would put on.
That's a pretty high score for you. Usually you give things about 6s and 7s.
Yeah, but The Matrix is...
It deserves that.
It's a next step up from most movies.
It's true. Especially action films. I'm going to give The Matrix a 9 out of 10 because I was so blown away by what I saw the first time around, just like many people were. And I've never been that mind blown by a film since. It stands alone. It's in its own lane, and it always will be.
Are you saying you never saw the Angry Birds movie and had your mind blown?
No. I know that you're joking, but I'm gonna respond honestly. The answer is no.
Okay, well, let me break down to you real quick how the Angry Birds movie is actually super alt-right propaganda, and that's not a joke. It's actually very obvious once it's pointed out scene by scene. Okay, so we're gonna start at the beginning. All right, so the red bird, right? The Angry Bird.
I think this is the part where we start playing Rage Against the Machine.